All right, episode 2, and it's a little earlier than predicted, but it seems we have our first guest.
We do.
For anyone who is watching on YouTube, you will see that we have Lily here,
The
who is
sweetest girl.
chowing down that pizza crust like it's no one's business.
She's loving it.
Look at her
We
go.
love you.
Anyway, we digress. All right, welcome to Ep 2, guys. Before we kick off, let's just take a moment for our mindful breath.
Yes, I really, really need this breath today. So if you can, close down the eyes. Otherwise, just take a beautiful, big inhalation into the belly through the nose. And let out a big sigh of relief to let it all go.
Can we do one more?
So nice. Absolutely. Yes, please. Bye, Lily. In through the nose. Out through the mouth.
Okay.
How good is breathing?
Fuck, I needed that.
Before we start this episode, as a very passionate Warramungu Yari woman, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land we are recording this podcast from, and honour their ongoing connection to country, community and culture. I wouldn't be me without the sacrifices of my ancestors, and for that I pay my deepest respect and extend that respect with love to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and all elders past and present. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Today,
We're here to talk about hustle culture, which is something that is very real.
it is very real. It's very real for both of us, but it's very real for society.
Yeah.
For most people that I am friends with, that I know, that I talk to, that are my clients, everyone at the moment I feel like is busier than they've ever been before. Everyone's like, stress is prevalent, like work, like it's just like this grind wheel.
Which, speaking of, I'm curious, before we dive into the theme of hustle culture, what's keeping you rushing at the moment?
This week what I'm finding is just really at the forefront of my mind is the gym. I co-own a gym in Brunswick, for those that don't know, or if you didn't learn that in our first intro episodes, called Airlocker, and we opened in November 2022, and we've just been on this really steady growth trajectory. Like any business, it takes a long time to get off the ground, and like any business, you make lots of mistakes along the way, you learn lots of things along the way, things change constantly, feel like you get 10 steps forward and then 20 steps back, and it just feels like that constant situation for us. And we've lost some really key staff members over the last couple of months. We lost our head coach about 3 months ago. He took up a new job that was closer to home for him, and now we've just learnt that our studio manager has resigned because she's a legend and she's a musician, and she's like in this all-female-led rock band, and it's epic.
Yes.
They're called Hot Machine. Shout out to Hot Machine. But yeah, Jess has just resigned, which is super sad for us because she's great and she's added such great value to our team. But now she's going off to pursue her other dreams, which we're super happy for. But then again, you just like, it's just a constant battle with, trying to fix things and solve problems. And I think what I'm struggling with at the moment and what's keeping me rushing in that is that I'm also in the thick of September, which is AFLW footy finals. Just there's so many other things that take my priority, and I feel like I just can't give it the love that it deserves at the moment, and I feel really guilty for that, and I'm waking up feeling really bad every day, and but it is what it is. You just can't really do too much about it, but it is very
Well, I know that
forefront.
staffing for so many businesses is so hard at the moment. So I really feel for you in that, having to hire and interview and actually just finding the right person.
And then when you find the right person, being present to train them and give them the attention and the time that they deserve to thrive in your business. And I just can't be that right now, and it sucks. And I feel bad for my business partner. I'm carrying a lot of guilt about that at the moment, but that's okay. It's just all part of the journey. And speaking of hustle culture, it's great segue into that. But before we get into today's topic, what about you? What's keeping you rushing?
Yeah, mine's a little bit of a kind of practical thing, because in an attempt to start rushing a little bit less, I have just hired a virtual assistant, and shout out to Catherine. And I know that in the long run, she is going to help me feel less busy and more on top of things. But it's that classic thing of having to train someone. So I know that it's going to be harder before it becomes easier. And right now I'm in that hard phase where I've been sick, which means I haven't had quite as much time, which means that I've had to focus on more urgent tasks, and training Catherine has had to fall by the wayside. And so now I'm in this mad rush to get Catherine up to speed, because I'm really hoping that it's going to be helpful.
It will be.
It will be, yeah. But it can't be until she actually knows what she's meant to be doing. She sent me a WhatsApp message saying, please give me more things to do. I was like, oh, babe, I'm coming. I'm sorry.
We actually did that at the gym. We hired a virtual assistant, and honestly, game changing. So when you do find the time, you will feel so relieved just by having somebody there to handball certain tasks too. But
you know, when so much of it is in your head, like, you know, because I work majority by myself, like everything is in my own head. And so it feels, I've been resistant to doing it because it actually feels like more effort to get it out of my head and into someone else's head. And I'm like, oh, it's just easier if I do it myself. But I'm like, no. That's what you've been saying, and that's not working because look at you, you're sick and too busy. So anyway, I took your advice because I know I asked you about it, and serendipitously I asked you about it as you were speaking to your virtual assistant, and you're like, that's kind of weird. I feel like that's a sign. Actually, maybe I'll tell the story of how it happened, because I was talking to someone, not you, about the possibility of bringing on an assistant, you know, virtual or not. And then it was about 24 hours later, I got a random inquiry through my website from a woman called Catherine who was applying for a job that I had not advertised. And she said, just applying for the virtual assistant job in brackets, if there is one.
Isn't it so funny though, universally? And you know, we're a little bit of the woo-woo.
Don't mind a little bit of woo here and there.
Humans.
Yeah.
But I think that there's definitely an element of like the universe listening to you in that scenario, because that's just random.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have a job and you just get this random email from this woman who's about to really, when you do have the opportunity to properly onboard her, it will change the way that you operate. And
Fully.
As a small business owner and essentially a sole trader, like you said, it's very hard. It can be very hard. So, yeah, when you get the time, Catherine slipping into the inbox, what a game changer
Catherine
she'll be.
Slid into my DMs real hard and it manifested and it really worked out.
We love that.
Anyway, so
Lily's back, by the way.
Lily is back. Hey, Lil.
Don't leave.
So, all right, hustle culture. Let's talk about it. What is hustle culture? Well, hustle culture equates busyness with productivity, exhaustion with accomplishment, and most dangerously, self-worth with professional success. So we're going to talk about that.
It's what did you say? It was the self-worth and addicted to validation.
Oof.
That is very interesting for me, because I feel like there's an element, I am, this is a little bit of a bruise to the ego to admit this, but I feel a little bit addicted to the validation that I get from the work that I do. And to the point that I think that there is an element that it's kind of the reason why I'm not overly interested in even dating at the moment, because, you know, going back to our previous episode where we were, you know, talking about societal pressures, and I'm in this really comfortable place at the moment where I'm very settled on my own. But I think that because there's a part of it that I get so much validation from my work that that almost boosts my ego enough. And I am really conscious that I also still have, it's funny because I get this validation from work, you know, instant feedback. If I do an event, for example, you know, you might step off stage, I might have emceed something, and then you get this feedback where you're like, you did such a great job, Megzy, and you walk away and you feel really good. Like that instantly boosts the ego. Yet then I go home and I'm in my own little bubble, yet I still grapple with self-worth. It's so weird.
Yeah. And I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Megzy does a lot of MC work. So I imagine that validation is happening all the time, right? And it's in real time.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to just quickly zoom out before we zoom back in, because this idea of hustle culture, I think, is kind of two-pronged. I think the first prong is what you're talking about here, which is like the internal narrative that then drives our behavior. But then I think that there's also the wider lens, which is the way that culture deems busyness as better, like busy is better. And so I think it's important to distinguish the two, because one might be true for one person, the other might be true for another, and both might be true as well. Does that make sense? You know, it's like this idea that not only, and correct me if I'm wrong, but not only is it like validation for doing a really great job and how that kind of gives you that little dopamine hit for a moment, but it's also the commentary when people are like, oh my God, you're so busy, you're killing it. Wow, like look how much you're doing. And it's like, whilst a part of you knows that it's like, yeah, but also that feels good because culturally that's deemed as success. It's like, look how busy you are, you're doing such a good job.
Yeah. And that is, again, a big part of what keeps the drive happening, because it's like, it feels nice. Like, of course it feels nice to be validated. You'd be lying if you said that you didn't enjoy hearing those kind of comments. And it's for sure a big part of the reason for wanting to keep going. And that's why, like I said, it's like almost uncomfortable for me to admit that it is a little bit of I don't want to say addiction, because addiction's a very strong word, but it's like I like that feeling. I'm like constantly chasing this feeling of like, oh, validation feels good, so I want more, so keep going, keep doing more. But like, no.
Well, I guess the problem with that is that what happens when we do nothing?
Yeah.
Or all of a sudden I feel like an empty void of worthlessness.
And your head is a noisy landscape to navigate.
Yeah. Or like, for example, maybe you don't get that job, or you don't, you know, for someone else out there, you don't get that promotion, or you don't get the thing that you think you deserve or that you want. And then all of a sudden that means, well, that's a reflection of who you are as a person. Oh, I must be bad. I mustn't be good enough. It's like, well, not necessarily, because of course there are so many factors into why we won't or didn't get something that we wanted. So it's like a trap, right? Because actually who we are as people has nothing, well, not nothing, but it's not about what we do. It's about who we are and who we are as human beings and the values that we uphold and, you know, kindness and compassion. But that gets so lost in this narrative of hustle.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think hustle is important in a way. Like I need to, I feel like I enjoy being busy and I enjoy achieving things, and I enjoy the working towards a goal and what comes with that. But it's like, where's the line? Like, where do you draw the line? And I think It's when your well-being or your relationships or these things start to suffer. And I've been at that line so many times and very consistently. It's like, you know, when you get sick, that's a prime example. Or when you get to burnout, that's a prime example of like, okay, I've crossed the line now, time to pull back. Or my relationship has suffered or failed because, again, I've crossed the line. So it's like finding that happy medium between striving for success and being busy and enjoying the work that you're doing or whatever it might be without, losing yourself along the way.
Well, and I think the fundamental question of this whole podcast is, can you get ahead without crossing the line? Like, to be in this competition, because, you know, as much as it's a yucky thing to admit, this societal situation, it's really competitive, right? Well, at least we make it out to be really competitive. And so it's like, can I get to the top without crossing that line where it's driven by factors that are less healthy, you know, like worthy, like self-worth, as opposed to actually I'm okay without this, but I'm still going to go for it anyway. And God, I wish someone could give me the answer to that.
I don't know that there is an answer, to be honest. But, you know, going back to what you said then about, you know, saying yes because I want to do this versus saying yes because I feel like I need to, you know, I think that that's an interesting part of what falls under the umbrella of hustle culture. And again, going back to those sort of dot points that you reeled out at the beginning, that kind of highlight what falls under hustle culture. And another one is for me, it's like that scarcity mindset. And I think what I've experienced on my journey, particularly in terms of career, I haven't always been in this position. So like work hasn't been necessarily thriving for me in the past, or like I haven't been on a healthy career trajectory until recently, really. And so I think because of that, you know, if I reflect back, and there's a lot of personal reason as to why maybe my journey has started a little later in life in terms of the career growth. And a lot of it has to do with like losing my dad and the process that I went through with that. And that's a whole nother topic for another podcast episode. But I have predominantly always been quite a lost soul, actually, or at least over the last sort of probably the last 5 years before this point. My dad's been gone 10 years, and so probably the first 5 years after losing him, I was so lost. I hadn't really I didn't really know what my passion was. I wasn't working in a job that I enjoyed, really. I felt very purposeless. And so, you know, I did a lot of work during that time, and had a lot of alone time. You know, COVID forced a lot of alone time, self-reflective time for growth. And then the page turned, and then opportunities started to present, and then I started to feel like I was working a little bit more in alignment with the things that I value, and work started to feel a bit more purpose-led. And so it's still very early into my journey of that. Yeah. That I think that is an element as to why I also push so hard, because it's very fear-led for me. It's like, if I say no to this opportunity, well, what if I don't get it again? Or what if that could leads to something bigger? And so I've felt like I've had to just say yes to everything for so long, because so much of it's been new, and I just want to learn as much as I can, but to the detriment of my well-being. The amount of anxiety that I have lived with over the last 3 or 4 years, because a lot of the spaces that I work in at the moment are new and unfamiliar. And so I'm not only, showing up, but I'm also learning so much along the way. So that comes with a bucket load of, anxiety, stress. And then on top of that, it becomes your priority. So it impacts your relationships, the people that you love, you're not making enough space and time for them. And there's a huge element of fear. And I think it's changing a little bit now as I've kind of, been on this path a little while now, since kind of entering into the media space and the gym and like landing all of these epic kind of roles. I've been in it for a little while now to kind of know, okay, I can start to say no a little more now. And finding a little bit more of the courage to just pull back and know that I'm not missing out if I don't say yes to that opportunity. But it's a full-on journey and a lot of the decision-making that comes up for me in this space is led from fear.
Yeah. Well, and also I imagine that it's like if my self-worth is tied to my achievements, then of course I want to say yes, because the more I say yes, the more I feel as though I'm worth something and like I'm doing something and contributing, as opposed to sitting in that emptiness of the no, which is scary and empty. And and this might, I don't know if this feels true for you, because I guess where you're at in your career now, you're not solely just fitness industry, and likewise for myself, I guess. But for people who work for themselves or kind of freelance, and I think you touched on it, but it's like you feel like you have to say yes, because if you don't say yes, what if nothing else comes up? But also, the more I say yes, the more I get paid.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even a choice, right? It's like I actually have to say yes so that I do get paid, right? The difference would be for someone who's on a salary, you could show up to work and spend half of the day on Instagram or online shopping because you're feeling a little bit off that day. And there's nothing wrong with that, but your paycheck won't change. Whereas when you work in an industry where your time and your money are inextricably linked, then saying yes and hustling is tied to your income. And then if we zoom out to the cultural thing, it's like, well, the more money I make, the more status I have, and the more status I have, the more worthy I feel, and the more worthy I feel, I can just relax and feel happy and like I'm okay.
But what does happy feel like? Where is happy? What is that?
Exactly. And also, because notice how fragile that whole system is, because you take one thing away, like getting sick, and then it topples over, and then you're left to kind of clean up the mess. So it's so hard. It can be, it's so hard. Someone help.
Yeah, help us. But I agree totally, and that's a big component of it as well. And the financial security side of things. Again, going back to that period of time where I felt quite lost and not working in jobs that, well, for one, felt fulfilling, but also in jobs that paid me. Up until only a few years ago, I was still having to ask my mum to help me pay rent, which somebody in your 30s, what that does to your ego is not great. It makes you feel like a failure. And, also that was a big driver, but far out, like money and the fear of not having enough. And I think particularly as women and especially as like we're a little bit different, because I'm a sink and you're a dink.
Yes. Proud dink. Proud sink.
Single income, what is it?
Single income, no kids.
No kid, yeah.
Versus double income, no kids. As in, because I'm in a relationship, so we share our money at this point.
So there's an element of that, like I have that extra layer of fear, because I'm like, for one, I have to like make enough money to survive in the economy that it is at the moment, which is very, I think to myself, far out, it must be so challenging for people who have multiple kids and school and mortgages and like it is hard out there at the moment financially. And and when you don't have your when you don't have clarity, for one, about what your future jobs look like, you know, my work is very just go with the flow and things just drop in here and there, and I can never make a plan on what I'm doing next week because it always looks different, and I have no idea when I'm getting paid. I might, you know, invoice for a job that pays really well, but I might not see that for 3 months, or I might see it tomorrow. I have no clarity of what comes in, what comes out. And that is why it's so, everything for me feels very like, okay, I just need to say yes because I just need to keep myself secure enough. And there's a massive element of that because of the way that we operate as kind of like sole traders or, business, not working for an employee essentially.
Well, and I guess like for you being a sink, it's like your rent doesn't change just because you're single. I mean, I know that you don't live by yourself, but like there are so many things actually that go into that. This like the idea of being a sink versus a dink, you know, because life is so expensive and it's so relatable. This idea of not being able to plan forwards because I don't know. And
it's even holidays. Like I got invited to a friend of my friend's wedding in South Africa over New Year's, and she's one of my great friends and I'd love to go, but the thing that holds me back is that I'm like, well, I can't share my accommodation with anyone, you know, like I'm not halving that, like I have to pay for the whole trip on my own and it's not shared. So that's a big part of why I can't go because, you know, so it's those that's just an example of the sink situation sort of.
But also for people who don't know what you do, they should go back and listen to our first intro episode so that they can wrap their heads around all of the different hats that you're wearing, because I'm conscious that we're probably talking about this in a little bit of an elusive way. So if you're a little bit confused by all of the hats that Megzy wears, go back and listen to intro episode 1 because you can understand that. The other thing I really want to talk about is this idea of the entrepreneur, because I think that even the word entrepreneur gets put on like a pedestal and, you know, it's deemed that if you're entrepreneurial, you have it all. You're like, you know, the pinnacle of success. But what most people don't see or understand unless they're actually in it and trying it for themselves is the cost of it and how hard it is. And I think I might have said this quote already maybe in my intro episode actually, but this idea that, you know, people are willing to give up their 40-hour work week working for someone else in order to work an 80-hour work week for themselves. And that feels so true. And so talk about hustle, right? Like the need to keep hustling when it's your own thing and when you feel as though you're building something is wild. But then also there's no such thing as sick leave, right? Not in the beginning anyway. You know, there's no such thing as annual leave. So if you want to take that holiday, remember that in many cases, and this isn't true for all entrepreneurs, of course, this is probably more relevant to what we're talking about between the two of us, but time is linked to money. And so when I take a week off or 3 weeks off to go to Bali, that's, you know, 3 weeks of not making any money. And so then you can, you know, because I also went to Bali recently and I had to work for the first half of the trip. It's like you can never fully switch off.
That's what I was just about to say is that you don't actually stop. You don't take leave.
It feels impossible. I know it's not impossible, but it feels impossible because if I don't keep doing the things that I need to do, I'm shooting myself in the foot because then in 2 weeks' time when I get back, I'm going to be absolutely burnt to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's and I felt that when I was away recently. It really reminded me of like, wow, when you go down this path of, you know, wanting to create things and even rushing slowly and the gym, there were so many times where I had to open my laptop while I was away to talk to you, to make decisions on things, to speak with my business partner at the gym, and you're never fully off, which adds to that feeling of like constantly hustling and it's a funny, again, I guess a paradox because you feel it does feel like I feel so grateful that these opportunities exist and that we are creating things and I'm loving what I do. So there's this element of that, like where it's just like, it's excitement. But then I'm like, for fuck's sake, I just want to shut my laptop.
When does it end? Yeah, which, I mean, on that, well, there's a few things I want to say off the back of that, because I want to read something actually that I came across on social media, because I think it's just a really beautiful illustration of kind of combating the hustle culture in a really nice way. But another thing that I think we were chatting about this on the phone maybe last week, but I was talking to my supervisor about this, about my personal experience of just going too hard, and he was kind of giving me the hard word around, I really need to take better care of myself and all of the things that I know. But he said something so interesting, which is that people no longer value a simple life. We are so caught up on the hedonic treadmill in which we think that the more we have, the shinier the things, the happier we'll be. It's the classic if-then mindset. If I have more money, then I can relax, or if I have more possessions, then I will be happy. But actually, the simple life really is oriented around just life's simple pleasures, just having a really consistent community, having loving people around us who we know will always have our back, cultivating or creating a family, whatever that looks like in your own unique, authentic way, but having some sense of family, having a single income household, this idea of the housewife, which is so politically charged, just the idea of it. But I actually remember when I was little, I used to say to my mum, I can't wait to grow up and be a housewife. And because the context I grew up in, my dad had his own business. My mum did help out and work in that business, but her full-time job really was taking care of her 4 children. And I used to look up at that and think, oh my God, how lucky are you? That's amazing. I can't wait to do that. And now I'm at this point where I'm like, how long can I push it before I have children so that I can keep working? And it's so interesting because it's like, even just like I'm noticing in my body now, even as I think about this idea of the simple life, it's like, oh my God, imagine that, like the relief that I feel even just pondering on that. Like imagine what it would feel like to step out of this competition that we all find ourselves in and actually just be totally okay with the simplest life, the simplest possessions, presence. Oh my gosh. But of course that's so hard to access for me anyway, because my self-esteem is so tied to my productivity and what I put out into the world versus just who I am and how loved I already am. And I wanted to read this, which this is like a tiny slither of what I'm talking about, but I just thought that it was really interesting. Guy sent this to me actually, and I think it's a tweet actually from Mark Randolph, who is the co-founder of Netflix. Should I just read the whole thing?
Yeah, read the whole thing. It's beautiful.
So he says, I've worked hard for my entire career to keep my life balanced with my job. In my book, I write about my Tuesday date nights with my wife. For over 30 years, I had a hard cutoff on Tuesdays. Rain or shine, I left at exactly 5 p.m. and spent the evening with my best friend. We'd go to a movie, have dinner, or just go window shopping downtown together. Nothing would get in the way of that. No meeting, no conference call, no last-minute question or request. If you had something to say to me on a Tuesday afternoon at 4:55, you'd better say it on the way to the parking lot. If there was a crisis, we're going to wrap it by 5 p.m. Those Tuesday nights kept me sane, and they put the rest of my work into perspective. I resolved a long time ago to not be one of those entrepreneurs in their 7th startup on their 7th wife. In fact, the thing I'm most proud of in my life is not the companies I've started. It's the fact that I was able to start them while staying married to the same woman, having my kids grow up knowing me and, as best as I can tell, liking me, and being able to spend time pursuing other passions in my life. That is my definition of success.
I have goosebumps. I love that so much, and I think that it is so important. It is that is exactly what this is all about, right? And you know, what I said at the beginning of this conversation, you know, I've already learned in such a short time of transitioning into this busyness and like finding passion, finding purpose and working really hard at that and prioritizing that, how that can completely impact a relationship and in fact pretty much end it. Multiple other reasons as well, but a huge factor to why my previous relationship didn't work was because I didn't do that. I just poured everything into my work and my busyness, and that doesn't equate to success for me. What he just said right there, and it is finding ways to get back to the simple life. And that's why, you know, coming back from the holiday, I know we talked about it in our previous episode, but like, it's why the minute that I got on the plane when I was leaving Bali, I was like, okay, how do I move there? What do I need to do to live there? Because that's what the simple life felt like to me. Waking up without a care in the world and feeling like that feeling of like the tightness in the chest, just being not present for the first time in a while. That is what we should be striving for.
Yeah, and I think it would be a disservice to not also mention social media, because in this day and age, if you're a business owner, you're also a content creator. And because we all have our phones on us all of the time, glued to our hands or our pockets.
Makes me sick.
Yeah, we can never fully stop. And it actually just reminded me of something else that I posted on my Instagram stories, and I had so many DMs about it, so I thought I'd read it because, again, it's another example of this idea of the simple life. And this was posted by The Cool Hunter. I didn't make this up myself. I wish I did. It says, imagine if social media closed every day at 6 p.m. like a shop. We would all be forced to meet up and speak to each other in real life, to be present with our families, to go outside, to read, make art, music.
I love that. And I think what we keep coming back to, and the word that keeps popping up in this conversation, is present, right? And I remember posting something on my social media at the beginning of the year. I've, over the last couple of years, changed my mindset around making a New Year's resolution and instead choosing a word. And so the word that I chose for this year, funnily enough, was present, and I shared it on my socials early in January. And I certainly have made more of an effort this year than what I did last year, because last year I was not present at all, and I'm now at least conscious of it, and I can catch myself when I know I'm really disconnected from myself. But yeah, that's one of the first things that you lose when you are so focused on the hustle and the grind, is being present with yourself, being present with the people around you. And how can you be the best version of yourself when you are not present? So it's that constant battle. Things like breath work, that's an amazing tool to be able to just take time out for an hour or so to access that feeling of presence. But I find it very difficult to achieve the goals that you want to achieve and strive and do all those things when you are disconnected from yourself and not present. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I feel like we've probably been going for ages. I don't even know how long we've been talking. But I feel like I'm reading so many things today, but I just came across so many great things when I was exploring. But I love this. This is a quote from an article that is titled "The Double-Edged Sword of Hustle Culture," which we'll post in the show notes, because it's written really well. It's bang on. So many of the points there speaks to our direct experience, and I bet for everyone listening, you guys too. But one of the closing quotes of the article is that it's about understanding that life is enriched not just by what we achieve, but who we become in the process. And so I think it's not about not hustling. You know, I think that it's, to your point, it's okay to hustle. It's about knowing where the line is, but also not being so focused about the outcome of things, but focused on who we're becoming in the process and the kind of person we are as we move through the levels, and to let that be the definition of success, like what I'm learning and how I'm transforming as a person and a human. like let that take precedent over the end destination, because the end destination will always be outside of our control, right? There's so many factors in that. But what I really want to care about is who I am, how I can be the most of service to other people, and how I can facilitate the most connection and, to your point, presence, right? And so I'd love now to actually ask you the question of what's helping you to slow down this week.
Before I get to that, I just want to round out by just saying that is something that I think is so important. What you said about less focus on the outcome and just more focus on the journey. Like that is my quote for this week. I'm almost going to write that on the background of my phone, because everything is quite outcome driven, quite goal driven, like working towards something. But instead of working towards this thing all the time, I just want to enjoy the journey. You know, like, oh gosh, and that again goes back to presence. Sorry, I know I'm just back announcing what you just said, but it really landed for me, because I feel like I'm so focused on the outcome sometimes that you forget to enjoy the ride along the way. Even with this podcast, like we've talked about this a little bit before, but you know, we've been planning this for well over a year and have got frustrated so many times that we haven't been there yet. And then we have to remind ourselves, no, but it's in the getting there that is what it's all about. And now that we're here and we can look back and go, holy fuck, like what a ride we've been on. It feels so nice.
And also now that we are here, it's like, yeah, it does feel good, but I'm still preoccupied with thinking about where we're going next.
Yeah.
So it hasn't even given me the thing that I was searching for, right, which is life.
Yeah, it's funny. But yes, what is going to help me slow down this week, I really, really need to get back into breath work. I am a breathwork facilitator and I don't have my own practice at all at the moment, and it feels very out of alignment. So I am going to make a conscious effort, and fortunately the weather's going to be really nice, and I live in a really beautiful, near the beach, and for me, I'm going to make a really, really conscious effort to walk across the road with my shoes off, feet on the ground, and just breathe, connecting to the sounds around, taking 5 minutes. Because when I do that, I'm way less erratic and my mind is a lot clearer. So that is my promise to myself and to you. Can keep me accountable.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, do I have the breathwork practice for you? Because as you guys know, we have our rushing slowly meditations, so feel free to whack one of those in your ears. What about me? What's helping me to slow down this week? Boundaries, I think. Yeah, just giving myself permission to say no. I think last episode it was permission to rest, so it's kind of similar, permission to say no. As everyone can probably hear, my voice is still really raspy, so yeah, permission to say no. And I think like what's actually going to help me to do that is probably coming back to my meditation practice, actually. I just did a 30-day straight kind of prioritizing my practice, but then I got sick, and so bang on 31 days. So since the 30th day, I have not meditated or done my breathwork practice at all, which I'm okay with, for sure, because life is seasonal and it's okay to be sick. But yeah, for me, I find it the most easy to say no when my nervous system is in a feeling of safety or relaxation, because when I feel safe in my body, when I feel relaxed in my body, then it's okay for me to say no. I don't feel as though I have to scramble and cling and feel anxious or scared, because I feel okay in my body. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Love it.
Did that even make sense?
Yep, it did.
Who cares if it didn't?
Well, thank you so much for listening in for another episode. You can make sure make sure, actually, this is important. If you like what you're hearing, even though we are the queens of rambling sometimes, but it really does make a difference when you hit the subscribe button and just follow us on the socials. We will promise to be a lot more active than we have been to date. But yeah, it means a lot to hit subscribe. So
well, and also to get involved, right? We said this in our last episode, but we want to hear from you. Like, how are you dealing with the pressure of hustle culture and, feeling as though, if it's true for you that your worth is tied to your achievements, like how are you untangling those things? What are your ideas? Share them with us, because not only will they help us, but we can then reshare them with other people and see if they can help other people listening as well, because we really want to develop a community here where we're sharing ideas, because as you may or may not be able to tell, we don't have the answers.
I think it's very clear.
So, hit us up, send us a DM, reach out. We really would value hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay, see ya. Bye. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114 or 13 Yarn on 139276.